Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. We will be talking exclusively for at least 3 hours about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock at last week's Oscars. That is the only topic. Really, Sean, the defining event of our generation. What do you have to say about this monumentous news story?
You know, say shit, get fucked. That's what I say.
So you're on Will Smith's team this time?
Yeah, I think I think the joke you're making is that we're not making a podcast.
No, we're
Clear
not.
to people, don't stop listening immediately. We're not going to do a podcast on that. But yeah, no, I think it is. I think it says a lot about our culture. The things that the broader public finds to be totally intolerable compared to things that are actually like morally intolerable. Because it turns out insulting someone that a person loves and them slapping you in the face for it is a totally normal thing to happen that honestly isn't that remarkable.
Also, the thing that has driven me crazy about this whole thing and why I'm making fun of it as a news cycle is that it happened. Will Smith apologized. He resigned from the Academy and apologized again. I think that can just be the end of it. That can just be like the end of it. It's okay for people to do stupid things and then apologize, and then that's the end of it. It was weird, but whatever. Oscars are stupid. I don't even think it was the most insulting thing that happened at that fucking Oscars ceremony. I think maybe having 8 of the categories not presented live on air and just throwing all of the hardest working craftspeople in Hollywood off to the side. I think that is more insulting than slapping someone in the face.
Yeah, only doing a fraction of the awards and somehow still having the Oscars be longer than it was last year is the most hilariously awful thing. I didn't watch the only thing of the Oscars I watched was the Will Smith thing, which I almost caught immediately because I just happened to look at the internet fractions of a second, I feel like, after it happened. So I got to experience the confusion of what the fuck, and then see someone retweet the Australian broadcast or something. So it's I went on that whole journey. That was my entire evening. Was just figuring out what the fuck is happening. This is really weird. But that's the only thing I saw, and then everything else I saw before that was just oh man, this seems like this is a complete dumpster fire of in Oscars in a way that is different from how it was a dumpster fire in some ways in earlier years.
Yes, I think that's exactly true. My night went. We did the podcast. I got all of that together. The Oscars started, and I was following them on Twitter and getting very annoyed, mostly by just the whole thing of their whole logic for moving the categories off of the main show was this'll boost ratings because we'll make it faster. And not only did they not make it faster, all the awards that went to the only movie nominated that made money, which is Dune, came before the show. So it's just the dumbest strategy you could have possibly done. I was annoyed by that. So I literally turned my phone to airplane mode and I watched Mobile Suit Narrative Gundam because I had been listening to the soundtrack and it was just in my head. I'm like, I haven't seen this movie in a while. So I watched Mobile Suit Narrative Gundam, enjoyed it, had fun. Then I turned my phone off of airplane mode and came up for air, and it was like the world had lost its goddamn mind because I came in about 20 minutes after the slap. And it was just, yeah. It was Twitter literally wouldn't load because of the strain on the fucking website. It was so funny.
Yeah, it was very weird to catch it almost immediately and trying to figure out what in the world is going on, and then just got to enjoy. I think it's just overall the whole thing is hilarious from my perspective.
Yes.
I think it's just an extremely funny thing to have happened. And the number of memes that came out immediately, it was just it's such an incredible joke. The Gundam community, I gotta say, had a fucking time with that because, Gundam fans know what it is to slap. I definitely saw a lot of people putting, clips or like cut out like photoshopped versions of Will Smith and Chris Rock into the scene where Captain Bright slaps Amuro, and Amuro's like, "You hit me twice." It's like, my father never hit me. It's like, who's ever become a real man without getting slapped? Like all that. It was lots of great jokes to be had.
I definitely, I think Will Smith was in his seat and he said, "You know what? Chris Rock needs a correction."
Yes.
And he walked up on stage and did it. Anyway, that is not the topic of today's show, because today's show doesn't really have a topic.
Yep.
We are going to be shooting the shit, doing some just sort of catch up on things we've missed in the last couple of weeks. There was one big piece of news we did want to cover this week, which is PlayStation revamping their PlayStation Plus offerings into a new sort of subscription model service. So we're going to talk about that. And at the end of today's show, you will hear, I'm going to edit in this talk I gave at the Society for Cinema and Media Studies annual conference this morning, actually. It's SCMS, is sort of the big conference in film and media studies. And I presented a paper on video games and video game saves, specifically. The mechanics of saving in video games. And that's already up on my YouTube channel, the full version of that. But I'm going to edit it into this podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the video version of it. If you're listening, you'll hear the audio, but you could go to YouTube and find the full video version of it. And hopefully that is of interest to people. It's an academic thing, but I think it's accessible and funny, and there's a lot of good little Easter eggs in there. So, including a Photoshop I did of Mario lying on a Dr. Freud couch.
Yes,
so
that was fun. You put that up on Twitter, and I saw that moments before we started recording the podcast, and it gave me a good chuckle.
Yeah, it was fun. So anyway, you will hear that at the end of today's episode. So if I sound a little tired, it's because this week has been nuts. I've had this conference to prepare for. I've been finishing up work on my dissertation prospectus, which is this big proposal thing you have to do before you can actually go write the dissertation. I've been teaching. It's been a busy week. I will say I have not played much more Elden Ring this week, because I've found that Elden Ring is a game I need a certain amount of mental bandwidth to engage with. And I have not had that mental bandwidth. So it has either been me sort of doing some random dailies in Genshin or watching Attack on Titan, which I did actually. The final episode of Attack on Titan is going to air in the US here in like an hour from when we started recording. And I am all the way caught up. And I said the final episode of part 2. They did finally announce this morning. The final season will go to 3 parts, which means the final season of Attack on Titan will have aired across 4 different calendar years, 2020 to 2023. Which really stretching the definition of the word final to its absolute breaking point. But anyway, Attack on Titan is very good. The other night, I watched 9 episodes in a row. There are only 2 other anime in modern memory I've done that with, which is Zeta Gundam. I know I did a 9-episode day, and Dragon Ball Super, I did a 9-episode day. So anyway, Attack on Titan is very good.
I just call 9-episode days Saturdays. That's what a 9-episode anime day is to me. Yeah, no, I did this because the Attack on Titan, the final season, part 3, or I prefer its Japanese title, which is the final season, Kanketsuhin, which basically means like the conclusion arc or the conclusion part, which I think is even funnier. That announcement just happened. I do want to say that, like, I think it's because it is extremely funny. And I think it's fun to joke on how ridiculous it is that it's called the final season. But I have seen some people be like very like kind of like mean and be like, "God, they're so incompetent. I can't believe what the fuck."
It's not incompetence at all.
Yeah, and I think like some people I've seen online, I think people don't understand that in Japan, the season is not a like term you use for television. It's not really how like Japanese TV is structured in almost any format. And so it is entirely called, because it is called in Japanese, Attack on Titan, the final season, part 1, part 2, and then Kanketsuhin, or like the conclusion. And it's entirely that because it just sounds cool. And it's basically like Attack on Titan's version of what of Dragon Ball Z is to Dragon Ball. It's just the production company is different. There's a big shift in the story. We're going to market it slightly differently. So let's come up with a cool sounding series of words so that, we can have Kajiyuki, the main voice actor, at the end of the trailer say, Shingeki no Kyojin, the final season. And then it sounds very cool. It's not because to a Japanese audience, it's like, I don't think, I Googled around on the Japanese internet a little bit just to like see, and nobody's like reacting to it in any particular way, because it's just like, it's just another core of anime that will come out next year. And this one in Japanese, that one is actually called, for realsies, it's the last one, because they're calling it the last one in Japanese, not like with some cool sounding English words that are just there for marketing reasons.
Exactly. I mean, if you haven't followed this, Mappa part 1 of this final season was 16 episodes, so like a supersized core.
Yeah.
Then part 2 has been 12 episodes, so a normal sized core. And part 3 will probably be like 8 to 9 episodes, which will be like a core where they get to put a little bit more money into every episode. That's totally normal. And the only question for Attack on Titan fans is, are they doing the ending as a movie or as a show? Because it could fit in either one perfectly well. And they decided to do it as a show. Great, we'll watch the show. It's not incompetence. This is how anime is done. And like, if they tried to do, what would this all be together? So 16 plus 12 is 28 plus another 8. Do you really want them to just make 40 episodes of anime in a row with no breaks? Like, it wouldn't be as good. That's the problem, right?
Yeah. I think like some people are looking at this in like thinking it's the same thing as like, I don't know, like the Breaking Bad stuff or stuff like that. It's just this is a totally normal anime production. They just decided to use a cool sounding English term that doesn't apply to the way that Japanese, like certainly anime production, but TV production in general just isn't structured that way in Japan. And so it's like, it's not equivalent in any way. It's just like it. I find it funny in the same way that I find that the English title is Attack on Titan, and that is grammatically nonsense, is just like funny because it's it is a thing that exists for a Japanese audience that has just been converted directly into the English-speaking audience with no attempt at all to sort of like massage that transition, and I find that very amusing.
Yeah, and if you're like watching anime only and really can't wait to see how it ends, you can just go read the manga. That's fine. Like, that's what I'm doing. I just put the last couple volumes of the manga on my iPad, and I started reading that last night. It's very good. And one day maybe I'll go back and do the whole thing. Normally I would read the whole manga, but it's a long manga, so I just decided to jump in near the end, and it's fun, and I'll get to see the story that way, and then I'll get to see it the other way. So it's all good. Anyway, but again, it is definitely funny to have a final season air across 4 different calendar years. That's just objectively, I love it.
Yes, and it's like, it's objectively not a season of television, right? Like that's the thing about it being called the final season is like, I mean, it's not. It is a show that will be effectively 6 seasons or arguably 7 seasons, because I know that part 3 also aired across 2 cores that were separated. But like, I do like that about half of it will be labeled the final season, even if it's going to be 3 different seasons of TV in a more like reasonable definition of that term.
Yes. So anyway, it's funny. Anime is cool. We love anime, if you can't tell. But Sean, what have you been up to?
I've been up to a lot of stuff. I'm curious, something. How much of the new Genshin Impact update have you played?
So I have not gotten any of the new story stuff. Okay. I have not explored the chasm. I did, as soon as it opened, I had a bunch of wishes saved, and I rolled for Venti, because I've always wanted Venti, and I did get Venti right away. I think it was pretty near, pity roll. So I got Venti, and I've been leveling him up, and I've been doing the photography thing.
Yes.
But, like, seriously, anything in a video game that has required, like, mental bandwidth, I have not really been engaging with, so I'm waiting to play the new, like, Dawn's Leaf and story stuff, and I am excited to get to all of that, because it looks great.
Yeah, it's really good, because I'm like, I've done Ayato's story thing, and I'm, like, about, I think, halfway through like, I finished the Dawn's Leaf's story chapter, which happens at, like, halfway through exploring the chasm, but there's like a bunch of other stuff, and it's if people haven't gotten into the new update for Genshin Impact, if you went away from the game for a little bit, this is a pretty awesome update. There's a lot more in it than I thought. I think like the chasm is a kind of like Inkonomia. It's a deceptively big area. Like you don't think it's going to be as big as it is, and then it kind of keeps on unfurling new elements and lots of cool puzzles. If you have a bunch of Geo characters, like I have, one of my favorite teams is my Geo Boys team, which is all 4 Geo characters, or it's made of 4 Geo characters: Ito, Zhongli, Albedo, and Goro. There are a bunch of puzzles, kind of like how Inazuma has a bunch of Electro-themed puzzles, that with some of the Electro characters like Beidou, you can kind of like cheese some of the puzzle solutions if you know how to use the character powers creatively, because you can use the Electro status effect in different ways. There's a bunch of Geo ones, and you could just absolutely steamroll through some puzzles that if you didn't have any of those characters, you'd have to like stop and think about. And I ran up to it, I'm like, well, I can make 4 Geo constructs at the same time. I don't need to give a shit about like how you activate this thing and that thing. I can just go blop, 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 and just like create this sort of like shockwave effect that you do with these puzzles that breaks these rocks. And if you have a bunch of Geo characters, you could just totally steamroll through those puzzles, which is extremely fun. Yeah, it is a very good update. And I about 30 minutes ago, I miraculously got Venti Jonathan.
Wonderful.
I didn't, so because I already got Ayato, which I was like set up for. I feel like I was like, okay, I went to pity on him, so it was a 50-50 thing. I used up all of the stuff I had from all of like the last update and the early parts of this update, used all those, and I did get Ayato, which is the one I really wanted. And I was like, well, I was resigned to being like, I'm almost certainly not going to get Venti. I'm at 0, like it would have to be a miracle. And then this morning, I did all my dailies, got just enough to do a 10 roll, and I got him on that first 10 roll. It was like, it's the most miraculous gotcha thing I think I have ever done. It's like, it was so like, I was not expecting to get him that I literally pressed the button and was about to pick up my phone to look at it, just being like, I'm not going to get Venti. I'm just doing this to fucking just do it. And then I saw the gold thing pop up and was like, wait, hold, what the fuck? And then I got him, and I feel like the next character I get in Genshin Impact will almost certainly have to be a full 180, just the full 9 yards before I get another character I want, because Venti is the character I have easily pulled the most for over the course of that game, because I didn't get him on that first banner when the game launched. I didn't get him on the second banner, which I rolled a bunch on when they did his first rerun, and so it was a character I just assumed I was destined never to have, and now I have him.
Well, that's awesome, because he has been your white whale, as you say. Yes. He seems, I mean, everyone loves Venti. He's sought after for a reason.
Yes.
But I am curious how Ayato is, because I think I might be able to get to Ayato, because I started from 0 with him, but like literally I had like 35 wishes saved up, so I put 10 to Venti, and then I've already put 25 plus probably another 10 into Ayato, so I might get there with him. And he seems cool.
Yeah, he's fun. Like, particularly if you don't have Tartaglia, who's the other kind of like water, like main DPS type character in the game. Like he and Tartaglia are kind of similar in terms of the roles that they fill in the team, even if like playing as them feels very different. But yeah, he's very fun. I haven't used him a huge amount because I haven't leveled him up all the way. Because I think you need to fight the boss that's in the Kokomi's region, the same one that you have to fight to level up Kokomi. So I didn't have a bunch of his ascension materials because I had already leveled up Kokomi all the way. I didn't have any of those left over. So I only have him, I think I have him at like level 70. So like I've just kind of started to use him because he's just good enough to kind of throw into a team and see how he works. But yeah, I'm having a fun time with him. Like one thing I really like is that he synergizes really well with Yaimiko, which is fun because like she's a character I've really enjoyed, and I wasn't like ready to kind of move on from her and the kind of the main team I'm using because I really like using her. And so I'm using a kind of what the community calls a taser team, but it's like an electrocharge focused team that's about doing a bunch of hydro and electro reactions. So I'm using Ayato, Yaimiko, Beidou for her elemental burst, and then I have Bennett in my 4th slot because he's just an easy character to throw in and he just makes your team better because he buffs and heals. And that team is working really well. I've been using that while I've been exploring the chasm. The fun thing about Ayato is that his elemental skill, you basically pop it, and then it turns all of your normal attacks into these like huge swiping like hydro slashes that go out pretty fast. And my favorite thing about it is that you just hold down the button because it replaces all of his normal attacks. So he doesn't have a charged attack when he's in that state. So if you just hold down the button, it's basically like a full auto attack, like you like using like a Genshin Impact assault rifle or something, where it's just like bop 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 bop, and he just shoots out his sword super fast, and the attack radius on it is absolutely ridiculously fucking massive. So he's incredibly good at attacking large groups of enemies because you're just shooting out these water slashes over and over and over again that make up a huge range in front of the character, and so you catch like every enemy that's like within a like giant radius directly in front of you gets smacked by these big water attacks. So yeah, he is a pretty cool character.
That's awesome. I'm excited to at least like see him in the story and all of that stuff, because I mean it's funny because Kamisato Ayaka has been like my main damage dealer for a year in that game. I love her. She's great.
She's incredibly good.
Yeah, and I love, we both talked about how much we loved her story when that came out, so I assume she's in this somewhere and we get more of that.
She doesn't pop up in his main story, but Toma does. I think there's going to be stuff. There's going to be some sort of like Inazuma festival in the second half of the story that I bet that is where you're going to get Ayaka and Ayato together.
Okay, there you go. Well, either way, learning more about that family is cool to me.
Yeah.
And, maybe making a team with the two of them would be fun. But yeah, there's all sorts of... Because I can imagine... Because I have some characters, like, I would imagine he would also go well because of how he enhances normal attacks with... what's her... I have her on my team, the fucking fire bow lady.
Yoimiya?
Yeah, Yoimiya, yeah. I'm sorry, Yae Miko got into my head, and yeah, Yoimiya, I think he would go well with her. I think he'd go well with some of the other ones I have in mind, so it would be fun.
Yeah, like, I want to try, once I have him more leveled up and I've used this Electrocharge team, I do definitely have in mind I want to try a team where I give him more energy recharge and do Yoimiya, him, Yunjin, because she buffs normal attacks, and then Bennett. And I think that would actually be, if you can get enough energy recharge on Ayato so that you can keep his elemental burst up, which basically is just a water version of Ganyu, so it just does hydro damage in a big radius around your character, and it buffs the normal attacks within that radius, which is all about what Yoimiya's kit is all about, her normal attacks. I bet that is actually an incredibly good Yoimiya team. And then, yeah, that is a team I want to try. And I know that there are a lot of people that are doing a freeze team that has both Ayaka and Ayato in it, and that team composition is also apparently really good. So yeah, he seems like a character that fits really well on a lot of teams, because you can either have him very much set up as your main damage dealer, or you can do kind of like a very tight, like sort of two main DPSs, almost like him and Ayaka or him and Yoimiya, kind of trading off a little bit with their skills and their bursts in the downtime between each of them. So yeah, he's a cool character, and he's voiced by Ishida Akira, so that's always fucking super cool.
Yeah.
Athrin Zala from Gundam Seed, so on and so forth, Garden, Naruto, the main character in Persona 3. So he is a very cool character. He looks like he stepped out of a like otome game, or like a kind of like a dating sim game, but aimed for like a heterosexual female market. It's called an otome game in Japan, and he so much is just like Prince Charming, who comes in on like a white horse. He's got this nice like cool suit that is white, and it's kind of like a Meiji era style. It's half Japanese, half like traditional Western suit. The crease on his leg is like so fine. There's like this cool, like his 3D model has so many cool details. There's something about his clothing that I think like they really put a lot of effort into like making it have this very like kind of tactile feel to it, where you can tell how much he cares about how like nice and sort of like proper, and there's no folds or anything, and everything is creased very properly. And he holds himself very well, like all that stuff, and the way the character presents himself, in the modeling and the voice, and then the writing and his story. It's all like top-notch stuff, as you'd expect from Genshin. So, very cool character. That I was glad to be able to get.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into more of this stuff once I start digging my way out of sort of the video game backlog I'm in, because I did play enough of Elden Ring this week that I've started exploring sort of the northern regions, and enough that I've realized how fucking big it is, and I'm intimidated all over again, and I love this game.
Yeah, no, Elden Ring is amazing. But as you say, like, Elden Ring is a game where, like, so, like, how I play games is I have, like, a reclining chair that I play in. And when I play Genshin Impact, I can, like, recline back in that chair and kind of relax and sort of, like, just sort of chill out and play the game. Elden Ring, I am, like, 90 degrees. I'm, like, looking forward. Like, I'm very locked in place, because it's, like, you just got to be at attention with that game. Like, I feel like Elden Ring, it's a game you can't just sort of sit back and chill out. And just sort of like slop your way through that game is just not feasible. Whereas like with this, one of the things I love about Genshin Impact is I just can like sprawl out the way I want, just get completely comfortable and just run around and explore, just like get lost in like the story and the dialogue and stuff. But yes, if I was very tired, Elden Ring would not be a game I could play.
It's even less about the like challenge for me than it's a big open area to explore, and I'm keeping in mind like all these places I want to go, and like just it's like over there is something cool, but I'm going to find this on the way, and just kind of the being open to all of that exploring and getting lost takes a certain level of time and attention that I did not have to give it this week, which is fine. I am happy to take that game slow. I mean, I'm already 70 some hours into it. It's a big one, but yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Anyway, What else should we talk about? What else did you... So you had Genshin. What else did you have in mind, Sean?
So there's a couple of things I wanted to hit that were things that I had done over our sort of like mini podcast break or whatever, when you had done your crazy plane adventure to New Orleans, where, you know, the Jonathan gets fucked by the U.S. like air service, basically, which is what like the first half of last week's podcast was. And so I sort of intentionally didn't talk about some stuff that I wanted to, just because like I wanted to give you space for your to air your grievances very appropriately on the podcast. But there were two things I had done. There's a game I played, and then an anime that I rewatched that I wanted to shout out again, which the anime that I watched is Little Witch Academia, which has come up on the podcast a few times, including when I originally watched it in like 2017 when it first when like the TV version first came out, because it's actually based on a couple of short movies that Trigger made over like 2013, 2015, and then those were so well received that they made their 26 episode season in 2017, and all that is on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, you can watch Little Witch Academia. But the main reason
Sean, this is so funny because I just was thinking about this and put it on my Netflix queue the other day. I've got it on my list of like ones I want to go through in the next few weeks, and that's so funny that you're talking about it, because I remembered you talking about it. I'm like, this looks awesome. This looks like a good way to get over the loss of Harry Potter in our lives. It's an actual good show about witches in an academy, not made by horrible people as far as I know.
Yeah, it's not made by horrible people, because the director Yoshinari Yo, like he's a very cool guy. Like Studio Trigger obviously is a great anime studio, and it is clearly Little Witch Academia is like a real passion project for the director Yoshinari, because of like it started as this sort of like little weird short film for like this whole project that a bunch of studios participated in, and it was the one that kind of shined amongst that group. And like it's clear like he really worked hard within the studio to eventually like get it to be this full TV project. And it's so good. The main reason I watched it is it was a thing I had been thinking about a little bit. I remember it came up on, I think it was on Weekly Suit Gundam, because the main character, Akko, is voiced by Megumi Han, who is the recast for Sayla that they did for the Origin OVAs. She's also, her most famous thing is she's the main character Gon from Hunter x Hunter. But I think her performance as Akko is my favorite thing she's done, at least of the stuff that I've watched, because it's just such a great character. It's just incredibly lively, like full, super energetic performance. And it's incredibly charismatic and just pulls you through that whole show so powerfully. So I'd been thinking about it because of that, and the other reason I'd been thinking about it is because all the Harry Potter shit has been in the news with, like, you know, the Dumbledore movie trailers and all that, and that movie's out soon. And then and specifically when I started watching it was all the stuff with that game had its whole like big showcase or whatever, and that was where a lot of the sort of discourse restarted up about like the house elves and the goblins and all that shit, because evidently I didn't really watch anything from that showcase, but evidently all that stuff is still in the game. So it doesn't seem like that game is going to be a scenario where it's like, oh, well, if you can just like, you know, accept the fact that at least J.K. Rowling's not working on the game directly, even if she profits by it, you can kind of put it out of your head. That seems to not be a scenario with that game, because it seems like all the nasty politics of that is baked into the world of Harry Potter doesn't seem to be addressed. And so that started a whole discourse online, and then there were like a lot of people like me, because I didn't say this on Twitter, but I thought it as soon as I saw the stuff with that game, because I think of it anytime Harry Potter stuff comes up, which is, you know, people should just watch Little Witch Academia, because the elevator pitch of Little Witch Academia is, what if you made Harry Potter but it was actually good, instead of being garbage. And so I saw stuff going around online. One tweet went really viral, which was good, which is from episode 13, where Akko joins a labor union of all of the non-human workers at the school basically go on strike, and she joins the strike with them. And it's an amazing moment, because Akko, like, at first she's like really annoyed because she doesn't really understand why it's happening, and because the strike, it means that like the food is bad because the cafeteria workers aren't there, like they're not being heated because the school is heated by like fire imps or whatever, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then she's annoyed by it. She's like, I'm gonna go tell them to stop the strike. And then the very next cut is a bunch of the teachers coming up to go try to address the strike, and it does a reverse shot, and it just shows that Akko is sitting there with a headband and a sign, and she's with all the other trolls and stuff, because she, as soon as she talks to them, like, it's one of the things that's great about the show is you know the characters so well by that point that the implied joke is that, like, of course Akko would join them. Like, as soon as she actually confronts that kind of injustice and seeing somebody who's being, like, marginalized and underappreciated, her own experiences of being a person at this magical school who is, you know, someone who doesn't come from a magical background. She loves magic because of these experiences she had as a kid that filled her with this dream of wanting to be a great witch, but she doesn't actually come from that kind of, like, kind of Harry Potter-y, like, aristocratic magical world, and so everyone makes fun of her and kind of puts her down and bullies her. And so as soon as she sees someone else being treated poorly, she will immediately join their side. And that is, like, truly a flashpoint moment that you can just, like, hold up for
Yes.
the key defining difference between Little Witch Academia and Harry Potter, which is Little Witch Academia is a story about a girl who is a true underdog. It's not the Harry Potter thing of, like, Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling wants Harry Potter to be an underdog by having him be bullied and stuff at the beginning of the story, but then actually it does the whole, like, oh, but you're secret magic royalty effectively, and you're incredibly rich, and you're famous, and everybody loves you. When you walk into a room, there are hushed whispers because of everyone's so amazed. When you tell them, oh, I'm Harry Potter, they go, I can't believe it, I'm actually talking to the Harry Potter. So Harry Potter is the absolute opposite of an underdog in every meaningful way, but the story wants to act like he's an underdog. Whereas Akko, like, legitimately, like, has struggles and, like, legitimately has to fight for her position in the school because she's actually not very good at magic. Not because she's inept, but because she's not a part of that world. And it's basically like trying to be a kid from an impoverished family, trying to make your way in this, like, incredibly rich school, where all the other kids have, like, these tutors that are incredibly expensive and, like, have all the like, their whole lives have been designed around academics. And then here's a kid that has to, like, work a part-time job, obviously couldn't afford a tutor, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have those advantages. And that's very much kind of like the metaphor at the heart of the story of, like, Akko's experiences at the school, trying to thrive in a system that is based on, like, privilege and, like, hereditary privilege and things like that, that wants to push her away, but she says, fuck you, like, I belong here, like, I'm amazing, I can be as good a witch as anybody else, and I'm going to, like, make the world smile with my magic. And she, like, through her kind of gumption and her compassion in being a misfit in the school, she gathers all the other misfits, becomes friends with her, and, like, slowly changes the school and changes the minds of the teachers. And then ultimately, like, the core of the story is kind of about her rivalry into friendship in a very anime way with a character named Diana, who is, like, the rich girl at the school, who's very haughty and arrogant and self-important, but at her heart is actually very similar to Akko. It's just she grew up in this, like, very restrictive situation, and that, like, this relationship of these two people that should be friends, that start as rivals because of their different backgrounds, ultimately coming together to be friends. Like, the whole story is just full of exactly what you'd want at that kind of coming of age anime magical story, and it is just a perfectly paced, incredible season of anime that I watched when it came out, but rewatching it, like, I like it way more even now. Like, I think the show is even better. I think it's, like, in the modern context, it plays even better. It still looks fantastic. The art style and character designs and animation are all top notch, as you'd expect of Studio Trigger. So it is a show that, like, I think particularly with, like, all the Harry Potter shit going on, revisiting it is incredibly satisfying, and just seeing, like, you get all the cool school misadventures and stuff like that, that particularly, like, early Harry Potter, if you liked that and you liked seeing how the magic worked and hanging out at the school and having, like, sort of stories about, like, school-age children told through a metaphorical lens of, like, magical fantasy, and you like that part of Harry Potter, this is that done to, like, an 11th degree of, like, virtuosity that Harry Potter could never even, like, really, like, approach, all while also having, like, really, like, satisfying, like, open-minded, compassionate politics that are, like, progressive rather than being the very sort of, like, conservative, gross, mean-spirited nature of what Harry Potter is. It's just Little Witch Academia kicks all kinds of ass.
I love it, and I've been scrubbing through the first episode on Netflix here just to look at it while you've been talking, and I'm already in love with the animation. The art style of this thing is just fucking gorgeous. It's my kind of thing. I love, which makes me very happy in the current era of anime we're in, because I love kind of rounded edges and kind of softer pastel colors and all that kind of stuff. We're in kind of a golden age for that. So, Little Witch Academia definitely feels that. We need a word, Sean, for the phenomenon where all the like big fantasy works in like America and Britain, the West broadly, in like the last like 20 years have just objectively been done better in various anime. Like Harry Potter, obviously. Fucking Naruto does all that stuff better.
Yes.
Little Witch Academia here. Fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! GX did it better. I mean, just it's like it's a well-known anime genre, right? You go to a fun school and have rivalries and all that kind of stuff. But also Game of Thrones I've been thinking about a lot because Attack on Titan, not to spoil anything, but Attack on Titan goes in directions Game of Thrones wanted to go in and face planted very hard, talking about the TV show specifically. And I'm just like, and there's lots of other things Game of Thrones does that various anime do better. And it's like, that we need a word for that.
Yes. I mean, because I think that was one of the things, partially because like when we watched it, like Zeta Gundam particularly had that feeling of where like people are like, oh god, Game of Thrones is like, it'll kill characters, it's so dark, it's so mature, and then you watch this, robot anime from the 80s, and you're like, no, Game of Thrones is like children's shit, like Game of Thrones is for like the 13-year-old kid who thinks he's cool in the back of the school. It's like not actually politically mature or dark or heavy in any of those like meaningful ways. And yes, it is definitely like I think a trend where you have all, as you say, like a lot of stuff where you have these like long running animated series in Japan that hit a lot of those same general themes and ideas, but executed from a much more kind of powerful perspective that also get away from some of like the just like I think the very mean-spirited nature of a lot of those kinds of properties. I feel like that's the thing that is particularly about Little Witch Academia and Harry Potter is the biggest difference. Is there's just such a love of the world and of like in the people who live in it in Little Witch Academia. It is a thing where it's like people aren't like good or evil in the world of Little Witch Academia. You don't have a fucking sorting hat that says, no, you're the good guy. No, you're a Nazi guy. So you go to the Nazi one and you go to the good guy one. And then you're a meaningless side character. So you get to go to Hufflepuffs and you're, nobody knows who you are. So you're a Raven man. So I don't know, like the reason why two of the fucking schools in Harry Potter exist is entirely because it would be way too conspicuous if there was only a good person school and an evil person school. So they're like, oh, we got to have two more to camouflage the very clever, sort of metaphorical system we're using here. But in the world of Little Witch Academia, Akko's not like a paragon of virtue. She's a character who has a lot of good things about her and also a lot of bad things that she has to struggle and work through to overcome and to mature as a character. And the same thing with her main rival, Diana Cavendish, who's like clear opposite in Harry Potter would be Draco Malfoy, who's just, Draco fucking Malfoy. And Diana Cavendish is this, like, incredible character who you see so much of why she's this arrogant, like, kind of haughty, upper-class person who looks down on so many other people because of the way she's raised. But you also see that she internally has all these incredible good qualities that are being squashed by the structure that she's been grown up in, and that she is unlearning actively those structures. And she doesn't do anything she's doing to be, like, petty and cruel and mean and evil. She's acting arrogant and haughty because she thinks it's better for the people around her, because that's what she's been taught, is that she's the best. And so what she says and what she feels obviously should take precedence over someone like Akko. And her unlearning that stuff is so satisfying. And it's like, that's just the kind of stuff that I think like often comes up in anime, where you just get more nuanced character portrayals like that aren't interested in the black and white. Is this a good person? Is this a bad person? I think there's just more of a focus on the internal psychology of the character and where they come from, and that more naturally informs their actions and behavior. And it's the thing that, like, in Harry Potter always kind of drove me crazy, is this sense of like none of the characters feel like people. They just feel like, it's Harry Potter. What is he like? He's just kind of a guy. He's sort of a jerk. I don't know. He doesn't have much of like a character. He doesn't have much of a personality. He's just sort of the good guy because the story has decided he's the good guy. He's the protagonist because the story has decided he's the protagonist. Akko is the protagonist because she has inherent traits in her character that make her particularly suited from the position she comes from to enter this world and change it from the inside, and that's why she's a protagonist. No other character could be the protagonist. And like that writing perspective and style, I think, is more common in these kinds of series, whereas it's harder to find, I think, in a lot of like Western stuff.
Sean, I've rarely seen you so happy talking on this show because this segment has combined your two greatest loves in life,
Yes.
talking about anime and shitting all over Harry Potter.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly right there, right? it's just funny. I'm looking at my Netflix queue, and I always forget to go to Netflix to watch anime. I know they have a ton, but Crunchyroll is where I go because it's the anime service. And obviously, Crunchyroll has most things, but there's a couple of things Netflix has, right? Well, more than a couple. Netflix has a pretty good anime section now, but I'm looking now, Sean, at ones I added to my list in the last couple of weeks, and it's Violet Evergarden, which we've talked about and you've wanted me to see. Psyche K, which I know you've talked about, and you love Psyche K, because I realized I, like you, love Hiroshi Kamiya.
Yes.
He's a bunch of things. For me, I know him as Trafalgar Law in One Piece, as Levi Ackerman in Attack on Titan. He's the Penguin in Polar Bear Cafe. He's in a million things.
Yes.
And I love him, but I've never seen him in a lead role. And I was looking up, like, what's a show where he's like the main character, and that's Psyche K is the one I recognized because you've talked about it. So I threw that on there. I know that's one I should watch because
that's a good one to watch when you're tired because it's incredibly funny. Like that show is like raucously hilarious.
That's the thing about Hiroshi Kamiya is I think in a lot of anime he's known for like Levi Ackerman or Trafalgar Law, of like the coolest cool guys in the world. But he is also one of the funniest people on the fucking planet when you give him comedy, like in Polar Bear Cafe is where I primarily know his comedy side from. So I added that. I don't remember why I added this, but I added a show called Kotaro Lives Alone. I heard that was good. I don't know what that is,
I haven't watched that. That one's pretty new. I've heard that that's good also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks cute. Anyway, those are ones that have been added to my Netflix queue to remind me to watch. I have a big anime list I'm trying to go through here. And there's new stuff too. Like I know everyone's been talking up that show Ranking of Kings, which just ended, so I might watch that too.
I think I'm going to start watching that one also because that was like the big one from the most recent season of anime that everyone's talking about, and that seems very good. That's Studio Wit also, that did the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan. One thing
They're
I'll say
having
about
a big year. They just finished Ranking of Kings. They've got Spy X Family coming next week, which looks. I saw the trailer for that today. Looks phenomenal.
Yes,
and then
it's great.
They've got a vampire show that's exclusive to Netflix later this year too. So they're having a big year.
Yeah, but one thing I'll say that's fun about Netflix anime, if you're like studying Japanese or you speak Japanese, one thing that's great that Netflix does that like almost nothing else does, like not even if you get physical media, is they have Japanese subtitles. So you can just watch it in Japanese with Japanese subtitles, and that's how I watched through Little Witch Academia. And that's fantastic because I tend to still, even though I'm like good enough that I could watch most stuff in Japanese and basically get it and understand it. Like it's for most things it's kind of inconvenient, or they don't even give you the option to turn off English subtitles. And then sometimes, particularly if it's something where I might not know all the proper nouns and stuff like that, it's easy to get lost. Particularly because of how many homophones there is in Japanese, that if you don't know for sure, oh, this is a weird made-up word for this fantasy setting or whatever, it's easy to get kind of lost for me in watching something without any subtitles at all and just purely with Japanese audio. So it's like, I really wish it was a thing, and obviously it's an incredibly niche ask. Like, I understand why it is not common, but I really wish it was a more common thing to have that as an option, because would be, I think, for me, the preferred way to watch it, because it is the best way to practice Japanese, because it's particularly for kanji, you just get to see the kanji all the time and hear it be read out. It's one of the reasons why I like playing visual novels to practice Japanese stuff, is it just really helps your reading practice. And almost nothing else gives you that option. Again, even if you get Blu-rays or DVDs, I personally, I don't think I own a Blu-ray or DVD from Japan that has, or like of a Japanese property that has Japanese audio and Japanese subtitles. Obviously, if you imported something, you could get that. But that's a really cool option that Netflix has.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I have all of the Japanese Studio Ghibli Blu-rays, is one of the reasons is they have this Japanese subtitles. And when I've written about those movies, I often find it useful to be able to look at the Japanese line and like take that out. And it's easier when you can see the kanji. So some of the imports I have, I always like to see those. Yeah. But that's I give Netflix a lot of shit because they do a lot of stupid shit. But the best thing about Netflix, by far, is that they're a big international company that has actual invested interests in different countries and gives that to everyone. It doesn't cut it off per country for a lot of their certainly for the stuff they distribute themselves. And so with something like that, instead of just cutting off the Japanese subtitles, they just put everything there for everyone, and there's a default, but you can change it around. I do think that's one of the coolest things they do.
Yeah, and it's easily like the smoothest streaming service in regards to any of that kind of stuff. Like it's so easy to just change if you wanted, and I do this sometimes is like, oh, I'm curious how this scene works in like the English dub and stuff like that. Like it's so easy just to like flip between those kinds of things and get whatever you want.
Yeah, on Crunchyroll, they organize them as like separate seasons, which is very funny because I was looking at Ranking of Kings, and Ranking of Kings is one that they kind of simul-dubbed around the world. So it's listed as having like hundreds of episodes because there's like 9 seasons for all of the different language dubs, but it's just one 25-episode season in each of those. It's fucking funny.
Yeah,
but
that's where you see like the tech debt of a system that was built entirely for something that only has Japanese audio and English subtitles.
Yes.
Eventually having to put on, okay, now we've got English dubs every once in a while. It's like, oh, this is a little clunky, but it works fine. It's like, well, now we've got, for some of these shows, English dubs and Spanish dubs and French dubs and German dubs and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, for some of them, you've got like 8. Eventually, Crunchyroll definitely needs to, like, rework how all that... I imagine it's probably, like, a tremendous task, but they might have to rework how that database stuff and all that works to compile that all together into selectors like Netflix has, rather than having them be opposite selections.
Yeah. Crunchyroll is definitely one where the catalog is so good, I don't care that the UI is pretty clunky. Mm-hmm. But you do sometimes, you go over to watch anime on Netflix and you're like, oh right, Netflix is the people who have like the good UI.
Yeah.
They're like the one streamer that has a decent UI. Although I don't like that they fucking shuffle my queue every time I look at it, which is weird.
That's weird. And then I don't, I hate the fucking skip intro button because I will never ever skip an intro. I will never skip an outro. It is like, as an anime fan, it is my like hard belief. Like, I'm not sitting, I might look at my phone or like check something on the internet or something. I'm not going to watch the ending theme every single second, every single time. But I ain't cutting it off. I like the song. I like the experience. It's designed to be paced that way. Get your fucking skip intro button the fuck out of here. Fuck off.
The skip intro button is just insulting all over the place, but yes, there's a reason why Crunchyroll is the one service that has never implemented it, because anime fans don't fucking want it.
Yeah, because the fucking openings in anime are like a key part of what is appealing about anime. That like you look at any Western TV show and you're like, come on, guys. Like look at what like even just a little tiny small production in anime will still have the most mind-blowing fucking OP with the most rocking ass song you've ever heard in your life. And then you go over to some, prestige drama that has like $20 million fucking dollars per episode budget, and it's got like a soft piano track over a shot that's slowly moving across like an abstract work of like a statue, and it's like it just does that for like 40 seconds, and then the title comes up out of like water or some shit that's very fancy, and then you watch your episode. It's like, this is lame. Who gets excited to watch a show after I've watched like basically like someone's fucking like prestige loading screen for 30 seconds.
I mean, we all know the experience of sticking with an anime for longer than you want to because you like the intro, right? Like
yes.
We've all done that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, get your skip intro button out of our anime. Yes. So you want to talk about that? What's the game you wanted to tell us about, Sean?
Yes, and then the other game is a game it's a hot new viral hit on PC. It's a rare PC game that I'm playing these days because you can play it on basically anything. It is a incredibly easy game to run, and it only costs $3. It's currently in early access. It's a game called Vampire Survivors.
I've been hearing about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it is incredibly addictive. The main reason I started playing is I saw some footage of it, and it immediately gave me incredibly like powerful nostalgic feelings for like flash games from the early 2000s on the internet. Like it's very much got that sort of aesthetic and the style. And if you're like me, like that's one like early 2000s internet, or like late 90s, early 2000s internet is one of the things I think I have like the strongest amount of like nostalgia for, because it's such a particular kind of culture and time and place that you don't really see represented or like exploited in a nostalgia style way anywhere other than in like weird indie games and shit like that. And just watching like 30 seconds of the game being played like immediately made me like, oh, I gotta check this out. Oh, it's only $3. Okay, like let me buy it and play it. Again, it is technically in early access, although the game concept is so simple that that doesn't really matter. Like it is a totally functional, playable game with like a good amount of content that's very fun. And so it is not a kind of thing where it feels unfinished. It just feels like every couple of weeks they're just adding new content to the game. But what the game is like fundamentally is it's very simple. Everything is modeled broadly off of Castlevania type stuff. So it is like, it's this thing where it's like instead of it being holy water, it's saint water and stuff like that, where it's like very clearly just like basing all of its aesthetic off of Castlevania, but kind of poking fun at it with like the names of things and how everything's like slightly different. But it does not play like Castlevania. Instead, it is a top-down view where you have your character, like you'd say your like default character who has his whip. You're walking around on a sort of like top-down view of a pixel world, like a kind of 8-bit, you're a Castlevania looking kind of world. But your weapon attacks on a timer automatically, so you don't press anything to attack. So you have the whip, it will just automatically every half a second or whatever the timer is, it'll just whip out and do damage like a couple of feet in front of your character and just go off automatically like that. So the only thing you do while you're playing the game is just move your character around, and then waves of enemies come in to attack your character. And so you're basically, the simple gameplay loop is just you moving around your character around this top-down world, trying to position your characters so that your attacks attack enemies and avoid getting hit by enemies so you don't take damage. And when you kill enemies, they drop little gems that when you pick them up, get turned into experience. And whenever you level up, you get a menu pops up that'll have randomized choices. So it has a kind of roguelike-esque quality to it with how these are randomized, where you either can pick a new weapon, where you can have, I think, 6 weapons at the same time, and they will all just be going off automatically. So you have, like, the whip might be going off, and then every once in a while your character also throws an axe above their head, and they throw a dagger in front of them, and so all those things will be going simultaneously. Or you can get passive level up items that will increase your damage, or decrease the amount of time between your attacks going off and stuff like that. Or if you get a duplicate of a weapon, it will level up that weapon and add different effects. So like when your whip gets upgraded to level 2, instead of it just whipping in front of your character, it will whip in front of and behind your character. And eventually like the whip distance will increase and the damage will increase, so on and so forth. And then where the game really gets exciting is when you get to the point where you've leveled up a weapon to the point where you can sort of like transform it into its ultimate form, where it will get like a bunch of like crazy abilities, like the whip will suck life out of your enemies and heal you, and stuff like that. Or the knife will just fire without any cooldown, so you're just shooting knives infinitely in front of you. And it's not just a knife, you're shooting like 8 knives infinitely in front of your character, because eventually you level up that to throw multiple knives at the same time. And so the whole goal of the game is to repeat this process of maneuvering your character, defeating enemies as they get more powerful as the level goes on, leveling up your character to try to level up and build up your character to keep pace with how much more powerful enemies are getting, and to survive for, depending on the stage, either 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And then once you reach that limit, you've effectively cleared the stage and you've unlocked a new level or something like that in the game. So it is incredibly simple, incredibly straightforward. All you do is move your character and level up your character and sort of try to build a kind of character build out in sort of roguelike fashion. But it is so addictive. It is so much fun. There is so much depth in how you play the game and what you go for your builds. There's a surprising amount of depth in maneuvering your character and strategies and how to sort of navigate the map and target enemies, killing high level boss type enemies to get chests that will help upgrade your weapons. So this it is a seemingly very simple game that has a shocking amount of depth, and it is also extremely fun because it's a game that you just completely, when you play it, you just exit your body. You're not thinking about anything. You're just you enter a state of pure nothingness, and it's just you, this weird Castlevania ripoff 8-bit looking thing, and leveling up, and that's it. And when you reach the stage of the game, past the 20-minute mark or so on level 1, which I've only done a couple of times, but when you get to that point, and there's something tips over where you just got just enough momentum where you're about to die and you're there's no way I can survive this. Am I just not putting out enough damage to survive? And then you just get that one upgrade, and all of a sudden the momentum shifts in your favor, and then you have all of your weapons eventually become the upgraded version, and then you just stand there in the middle of the screen and nothing can touch you. and you just watch everything try to kill you, die before it gets even like fucking 2 steps ahead of where it spawned, and you just stand there, and every once in a while you're like, I could use a little bit more experience, and you move like 1 step to the left, and then your character levels up fucking 10 times in 2 seconds because of all the experience that has stacked up, because at the end of the level, the entire screen is filled with enemies. It's a completely ridiculous, stupid amount of enemies. They're just exploding and fucking dying, and lightning shooting from the sky, and you're shooting a million like knives in a million directions all at once. And fucking there's these 2 like pigeons that are just going crazy, shooting laser beams that are like rainbows all over the screen. Like, it's complete nutso madness. You're just standing there watching the chaos go on, and it's like, that's the most fun in the whole game, is struggling to get to that point, having the momentum shift in your favor. Just spend like 8 minutes watching it happen. Just be like, you can't touch me. Nothing can touch me. I'm fucking immortal. I'm invincible. And when I first hit that point, I like have become very addicted to playing this game. And I do like 2 to 3 runs every day. Like, I like almost like compulsively at this point, because there's something so simple but so much fun about playing Vampire Survivors. So I really wanted to talk about it on the podcast, because it is, you know, it is certainly not as like remarkable and amazing a game as Elden Ring or anything like that. But of the new games I've played that have released in 2022, which so far is Elden Ring and Vampire Survivors, this is easily one of the best games I've played this year. And it's, you know, and it's in the running, and like legitimately I would be very sad if the end of the year comes and somehow Vampire Survivors wouldn't be on my top 10 list, because I'm like legitimately having enough fun with it that it is currently one that like I have put on my list that I have of like games I've played this year and want to play this year, as like I think you're going to be in there, buddy. I think you're going to make it, because Vampire Survivors is a hell of a lot of fun.
This is so cool, because I heard people talking about this a while back and was excited about it. But they didn't have a Mac client at the time. Mm-hmm. But I just looked it up because you said this, Sean, and they have added a Mac client. So I just downloaded that to my computer, and I'm very excited to give it a try. So if you had wanted to play this game, but you're on a Mac like me, there you go. It works. And it works on my M1, so it seems like it works on all the new hardware too. So anyway, I'm excited to give this one a try. It looks awesome.
Yeah, one thing a tip I would give to new players, because this took me a while to sort of figure out how this worked, and it's probably worth just kind of looking up this element of the game online just to make it easier, is how you upgrade your weapon to its ultimate form, is you need to have an associated upgrade with it. So, like, for instance, one of the Fire Wand weapon, it will only be able to upgrade to its ultimate form if you also have I forget what the item is called, but it's the item that like levels up your total damage. And so every weapon has an associated passive upgrade, and so you need to have both of them for it to go up to that ultimate form. And that was something that it took me a little bit to figure out. And once you do it the first time with that weapon, it will tell you in the menu interface what it is, so you don't have to like memorize all of them. But it's definitely worth it once you start kind of getting a sense of the game. You feel like, okay, I'm getting good enough that I'm starting to get weapons fully upgraded, to just Google Vampire Survivors weapon evolution and just find a chart online that tells you, okay, this is what I should be kind of aiming for. And it always makes sense, because the passive upgrades are always sort of logically associated with the kind of weapon it is. So you can usually kind of intuit it, but it is good to know, because the game doesn't have a tutorial, that's kind of how that weapon upgrade thing works, because that is a key element of how the end game works for Vampire Survivors.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. I mean, I like this kind of thing anyway. Mm-hmm. It reminds me, some of what you were saying reminds me of like my obsession with Hades, when you guys all know me talking about that. Great game. Everyone should play it. But yeah, so that sounds fun. I'm excited to take a look at that.
Yeah, and it's also just fun, because you also like Castlevania stuff. It's just like fun to get all the like weird, like sort of, again, it reminds me of early 2000s web games, not just in the simplicity of the design and all of that, but also like the kind of humor in the game is a lot like that. It's like, I don't even know if I'd call this a pun. It's like, it's somewhere between a pun and like you just couldn't come up with anything. So it's like, just like you swapped 2 of the letters. But there's something about that like I find that aspect of the game incredibly charming. Like I like whenever I unlock a new character or a new weapon, I'm always kind of amused at like the sort of store brand version of Castlevania, like cross or whatever it is that you unlock. Like all that stuff is very fun. So that's another part of the game. If you like Castlevania and you like that kind of like very simple, weird humor from the early internet, like this is a throwback in a lot of ways to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else in the stuff portion here before we move on to a little bit of news?
I think I hit all the stuff I wanted to talk about. Watch The Little Witch Academia, play Vampire Survivors, and you'll have a really good 2 weeks, because that is actually most of what I did in the 2 weeks between those podcasts, because I actually finished Elden Ring pretty shortly after recording the podcast that one time, and then it was a lot of just watching that show and playing that game.
Wonderful. Well, then let's talk about the news. The news this week is that Sony has announced new PlayStation Plus memberships. This was reported a couple months ago by Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, that they were planning to combine PlayStation Plus, which is their service that charges you to use your own internet and then gives you 2 usually shitty but sometimes good games every month. And that's their $60 a year thing, kind of like Xbox Live Gold. And then PlayStation Now, which was their streaming service that... Well, it was a streaming service. Then it became kind of like a smaller version of Xbox Game Pass with like a lot of, not like top tier new games, but a lot of good older PlayStation games and like, maybe 5 years old at this point or something rolled in there. But PlayStation Now was never like a huge thing, I don't think, for most people. But they're combining them and expanding them also with, this is how they're going to start delivering backwards compatible content, sort of a la the way Nintendo does it, tied to the online subscription. So we knew this was coming, but now we have the full details on it, and I have it in front of me because it's needlessly complicated, but let's talk about it. It's 3 tiers now. It's PlayStation Plus Essential, which is what PlayStation Plus already was, charging you to use your own internet, and then the 2 monthly downloadable games and some of the discounts and cloud storage and some of that other stuff that was already there.
Yeah, that service is like completely unchanged. So if like you have that, like they're not doing anything to that. They're basically, everything else is like in the other tiers is what they're adding, basically.
And the pricing for that is also the same as it's been, which is $10 a month or $25 a quarter or $60 annual, which is I think how most people buy it. Then there is PlayStation Plus Extra, which is all of that, plus a catalog of up to 400 of the most enjoyable PS4 and PS5 games, including blockbuster hits from our PlayStation Studios catalog and third-party partners. So this is sort of like, it seems like an expanded version of what PlayStation Now is at the moment.
Yeah, specifically, they definitely never had, there was no like PS5 versions of games, I know, in PS Now up to this point. So that is like an announcement of like, there'll start being PS5 games for sure into like, and presumably the existing catalog of PS4 games, which are all the ones that you could download. Those were not streaming only. Presumably those will all carry over as well from whatever the PS Now current library is.
Yeah, and everything in this tier is downloadable. I think there will be an option for streaming on some of this, but this is downloads. And that is priced at $15 a month, $40 a quarter, or $100 annual. Then there's PlayStation Plus Premium, which is all of that stuff. Then another up to 340 additional games, including PS3 games, which are only going to cloud stream for obvious reasons. If you know how the PS3 was made, it's hard to emulate. Especially you can. There's actually a pretty good emulator going for the PS3 on PCs now, but it takes a lot of power. And I this is one I don't blame Sony for not building an emulation of. But they'll also have classic games that you can stream or download from PS1, PS2, and nice little surprise PSP, all in there. Again, they have not named any games, but that is a pretty sizable number they're promising. And then this will also offer streaming for... Oh, and this is where you can stream all the other games if you want to as well. So if you don't want to have to download them, you would need PlayStation Plus Premium, and then you can stream the games. And then they will also have time-limited game trials in this tier. That they don't have a lot of details on. Is that like just for some games? Will it be for lots of games? Unclear. They just say that. But that will be $18 a month, $50 a quarter, or $120 annual. A lot of this is actually stuff that I think is fairly exciting and interesting. I will say the thing of doing PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium as different tiers makes zero fucking sense to me, because the price difference is very small, and I mostly find it confusing to try to explain to myself or others. But the overall idea of what's in that premium tier of having actually getting a lot of backwards compatible games on the system. I've wanted PlayStation to do that for almost 10 years now, since they moved on from the PS3. I think there's a lot of potential value there. And while the monthly costs are basically in line with Xbox Live or Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, The annual costs are actually quite a bit less.
Yeah.
An annual of gold of Game Pass Ultimate would be about 180. The PlayStation Plus Premium would be 120. You're not getting new games in there, so it's not a one-to-one for Game Pass, but it is possibly a pretty cool service. So those are sort of my starting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically almost exactly what Bloomberg reported. Like, I don't remember if they had details on pricing or anything like that, but like conceptually, this is exactly what they said, which is it is a fusion of PS Plus and PS Now. It's like it's not a like brand new service conceptually. It's not. It doesn't feel like it's not like a Game Pass competitor in the sense of like I don't think they're trying to like. I don't think they're trying to make it like the exact same kind of value proposition and stuff like that Game Pass is, obviously, because it's like it's a pretty substantially cheaper service at that like top level tier than what Game Pass is, which has always been the case with PS Now. It's always been a thing where it's like, I mean, it's a worse service than Game Pass, but it's also a cheaper service. So it's like, I mean, what can you expect at a certain point? So this feels to me like it is just a way of them sort of simplifying some of that weird business stuff of like PS Now always felt like this like ancillary thing that existed. It seemed like if you were someone that didn't own a lot of PlayStation 4 games, PS Now always seemed like it was a good deal if you didn't already own a bunch of that back catalog stuff. But they never advertised it. They didn't talk about it on their shows. It was just like a service that has existed since like 2014 or something. Like PS Now has been around for a long time. And there just was one of those things that Sony like just never felt like they cared enough to kind of push. And so it makes a lot more sense to say, let's integrate that into our current existing subscription thing that is very popular, because it's like, if you play online games, it's necessary, and it's where they get like an insane amount of their revenue from annually. And let's just build it into that and get more money that way. And so I think from like a business perspective, this is very smart. And I suspect that the reason why they went with the 3-tier thing, because I'm with you, Jonathan, like it feels like needlessly convoluted, but I bet the reason why they did it is I think they are expecting most people to want to go to that middle tier, right? That like it's the kind of thing where the top tier exists to make the middle tier seem more appealing, because most people I don't think care that much about playing PS1, PS2, PS3, and PSP games on their PS4 or 5. Like, you know, some people will, and that service will be there for them. But I think most people will look at that and be like, oh, I don't need that. And they'll look at the middle tier and be like, oh, that's a great deal because it's cheaper than that other one, and it doesn't give me all the stuff that I wouldn't have really played that anyways. Like, I think I suspect that is like the entire like marketing, like capitalist reason why they went for that kind of like weird 3-tier structure.
Except that makes sense. Except also like, and maybe it's supposed to work in both ways. Because a tiering thing is also meant to upsell to the next level, you know? And, you know, because the price difference between those two tiers is so small, maybe it goes either way. Maybe someone thinks they wouldn't subscribe at all, but then they see there's that middle tier, and then maybe someone thinks they want the middle tier, but it's only a little bit more for the extra tier, so they go for that one.
Or they're like, you know, they're at their normal PS Plus tier, and then they see it's like, like going through like, oh, that's a big price jump, and then they see the middle one, they're like, oh, that's not that much more than what I'm currently paying. I'll just like do that. Like, I think it just sort of like creates a psychological pressure that like for most people will incline them to spend more than they are already spending on PS Plus.
Yes, that's fair. And you know, I think in a world where Game Pass is out, and I think most people who use an Xbox at this point do not pay just for Xbox Live Gold. I think they would get Game Pass Ultimate or some combination thereof. I feel it would be weird to me to use your Xbox and only have gold to play online but not have the extra stuff. I think it's increasingly untenable to just have your online service that is basically just there to charge you to use your own internet, which again is a scam. I want to be clear about that. It's for Xbox Live Gold, for Nintendo Switch Online, it's all fucking scam. You know that because if you go play on Steam, they don't charge you for your own internet anyway. But I think with Nintendo having their big catalog of old games, you know, Xbox having Game Pass, I think PlayStation Plus needed some kind of revamp, which is what this is. I think the weirdest thing about this announcement is that they really didn't announce any games that are going to be in it. They did announce a couple of high-profile ones for the tier where you get PS4 and PS5 games. They say in their post, Death Stranding, God of War, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Mortal Kombat 11, and Returnal. will all be in there. And that actually, some of that interests me because I haven't played Returnal yet and I would like to, and maybe I'll be checking this out and that would be a good one. I do think it's weird they didn't name like any of the back compat games, or just, I wish they had a little, like a sentence like that for some of the other stuff of like, and we'll have this and this, and because it's a little weird that some of that isn't mentioned yet.
I'm sure that will come. Like, I bet some of those are like still like deals. Like, I bet particularly for like some of that really old shit, like the backwards compatible stuff, like a lot of that is like rights issues that current distributors have. So I bet they're still like hammering all that out.
Absolutely, but there's first party stuff that they definitely have that I think it's weird there wasn't like the listed like, and we'll have PS1 games like, you know, X games Sony can put on anything, you know, whatever that would be. So yeah, we'll see. I hope it's cool. There's some stuff here that I think would be really promising. I still, the same way I feel about the Nintendo Switch Online stuff, I miss all the games I bought a la carte years ago for my PS3 and PSP that won't be carried over, but now will be part of a subscription if they're there at all. Stuff like that kind of annoys me. But, you know, I have high hopes that there'll be good stuff, because those numbers are big. They say, like, you know, if they're going to have 340 backwards compatible titles, that's potentially a pretty big library if that's spread fairly evenly between PS1, 2, 3, and PSP. The PSP thing is really cool because I did not see that coming, and there's potentially cool stuff there. PSP emulators are pretty easy to do, so that's I wasn't even thinking of that, but it's still
that's
cool.
The kind of thing where I would be curious to see with the PSP stuff, like, what are those games going to look like? Because having played, you know, Crisis Core on a PSP emulator and being able to like just fucking pump up that internal resolution and put some ridiculous anti-aliasing and force all that on top of the game, which, to be fair, it like a lot of that in those emulators does end up increasing the more you do it, like the more kind of input delay you're also going to be putting into the game in some cases. But it also makes those games look so fucking good that I don't know if I would want to play Crisis Core and have it look like it's like some weird like 240p video on YouTube, you know, kind of like just like super chunky, gross looking on your like TV. Like, if you think that like Switch games sometimes scale up awkwardly to a 4K TV, like a very straight like PSP game up on your like big screen TV is not going to look super nice. So I wonder if there will be like nice emulator features to clean up some of that stuff or not.
Yeah. The time frame is also weirdly vague. They say in the June time frame, we'll begin with an initial launch in several markets in Asia, followed by North America, Europe, and the rest of the world where PlayStation Plus is offered. We aim to have most PlayStation Network territories live with our new PlayStation Plus games subscription service by the end of the first half of 2022. You could just say sometime in June this will all come out, because that's what the end of the first half of 2022 is. So I find the wording of that statement very weird. But yes, June, broadly, is when this is coming. So I'm curious. I did see Wario64 on Twitter today. The deals guy did post that if you want the premium, the highest level, you can just buy a year of PS Now right now, and it'll switch to a year of PlayStation Plus Premium when this happens. They've said that in the fine print. So that's half the price, because a year of PS Now is $60. So if you're champing at the bit for it, you could go do that. I will probably wait to see what the offerings are. But I'm curious about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for me personally, like, I've just kind of moved away from wanting to have lots of ongoing subscriptions at the same time. Like, I don't have PS Plus anymore. Like, my Game Pass thing has lapsed. I mean, I got that Game Pass Ultimate thing for like $3 for 3 months or whatever. I just haven't like really like gone back to that. I did play, like, before it lapsed, I did play a little bit of the Master Chief Collection, because that's obviously also how I got my Xbox Live Gold. And I did boot up Halo Infinite, and that game seems to be fucking dire right now.
It's dead. It's so dead.
There are going to be 2 new maps in King of the Hill in a month. That's going to be your update. And I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay. But anyways, like, I for me personally, like, this isn't hugely attractive just because, like, I just don't like the subscription thing that much anymore. It has become this thing where it's like so dominating of every single thing you like interface with nowadays. It has to be some weird subscription thing, that it's so much mental energy to keep up with and try to remember every little fucking thing you're subscribed to, that I have just like tried to minimize that as much as humanly possible and only do like buy a month of it, either like leech off of. So like my Netflix is just my parents' Netflix account, which now they're trying to crack down to that kind of shit too. So it's like, either if I can leech off a subscription that someone else has, like, that's great, or I'll get like a month of Disney Plus, or I'll do that Game Pass deal. But like, I feel like personally, I've just like moved so much out of the mindset of wanting to have all these running subscriptions at the same time. Instead, I honestly, like, I've gotten so much more into buying Blu-rays and DVDs and just like buying the shit I want. And I've just found that it might be a little bit more expensive in the long run, but actually, honestly, probably it won't. In the long run,
no, it won't be. No, it absolutely won't be, Sean.
Like, it feels like you're wasting money, and then you like look at it and you start calculating the amount of money you actually spent. You're like, well, no, like, I feel like I'm perfectly happy with what I watched, and I don't need to have theoretical access to every movie produced in the last 5 years or whatever, because I'm not going to watch any of that shit. I just kind of want to watch this, I just really want to watch K-On! So I bought the fucking Blu-rays for K-On!, and I'm happy to own that. And I don't need to own another subscription service.
You're describing my mindset perfectly, Sean. I'm very much I turn the taps on and off when I need to.
Yeah.
There's, in terms of subscriptions, I genuinely have like year round. Crunchyroll, because it's good and I like the work they do and I use it. I pay the $2 a month for my Viz Media Shonen Jump app, which is like, some months I don't technically use the stuff in the catalog that I'm paying for, but it's $2 a month and I do like the work they do, so I'm okay with that. That's fine. Subscription services, like right now, like I said, Crunchyroll. My Game Pass has been off for a little while because I haven't been using it, so I haven't renewed it. I got a deal on PlayStation Plus for 2 years around the time when the PS5 came out, so I'm up through the end of this year on that. And that was just because it was like, when the PS5 was coming out. But I realized Genshin doesn't make you use PS Plus, does it? Okay,
no. So you don't need it. For
that's the only online game I play. That and Elden Ring, I guess. But anyway, so there's that. So I don't, and then a couple of services. I don't use Netflix almost ever, but when I do, my parents have it, so I just use their Netflix. And I did pull a fairly devious scheme where I did kind of want to use HBO Max more, but it's expensive. So I started recommending HBO Max shows to my parents while I had it and recommending it to them. And they got hooked on a bunch of stuff. And then at the end of the year, mine ran out and they're like, what happened to the subscription? I said, well, I wasn't using it much, so I stopped paying for it. And they're like, oh, we'll pay for it. And I'm like, okay. So now I have free HBO Max.
Wow.
That I realize makes me sound like a piece of shit, but they are using it a lot. So
no, I mean, it's just. I mean, I haven't paid any money for HBO Max because I just used my parents' subscription. It's like I just didn't have to go through a way, like a 3D chess way to get that to happen. But the ends justify the means, right? Like you're not doing anything worse than what anybody else is doing. And if your parents are watching fucking Peacemaker or whatever, they're having a good time. There you go.
They were not watching Peacemaker. I watched Peacemaker's great. But, YouTube Premium. That's the only one that I like since it came out I've had year-round, because I do watch YouTube every day, and it gets rid of the ads, and I'm good with that. It has other features, too, like picture-in-picture and stuff that I genuinely do use every day. So, but yeah, other than that, there's very few that I really do have as, like, a year-round thing, and for most of the lifespan of the PS4, actually, I did not have PS Plus as a year-round thing. Like I said, I turned it back on when the PS5 came out, because I wanted to kind of see the full experience of it, but, I don't use it much. The game's like
Call of Duty got bad, and I stopped caring about PS Plus. Is basically what happened to me. It was like, oh, Call of Duty, I had a good time with that, and then that got bad, and then I didn't play Destiny anymore. And now I don't think you need it for Destiny because Destiny has turned into a free-to-play game. So I actually don't know how that works. But like, those are the only things I played regularly online. And now it's like Genshin Impact. You don't need it. It's like, well, I'm good then, baby.
Yeah. Honestly, the only platform where I do need the online, because I play online games with people, is Switch, which is so fucking funny and ironic to me. Yeah. But I do play with my brother Smash Bros. And Mario Kart and stuff, and we have to call each other on the phones because there's absolutely no way in-game chat is going to work. But that's fine. And I say phone. We use a messaging service, so it's free. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's better than what it would be in-game. But there's basically no option for it. But yeah, so, that's fine. But Switch Online also is very cheap if you're not paying for the N64 stuff, so, yeah.
Yeah, so
which is a funny sentence, that the N64 stuff is what drives that price up.
Exactly. You gotta just play the N64 version of Majora's Mask so hard that, you just gotta pay that extra billion. Yeah.
Yeah. Homebrew your 3DS and play that. I'm just telling you, if you want to play Majora's Mask, it's a better version of that game.
I eventually, I'm that is definitely going to be. I want to replay Majora's Mask, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get a 3DS for a while. Was like, there's no way I'm going to try to play the N64 version of that game again, knowing like all the changes they made, because I never really liked Majora's Mask that much on the N64, and the list of changes they made for that HD update or whatever was just like it was like bullet point of like everything that like turned me off of Majora's Mask. Is like, yeah, we fixed this, we put it in a side quest list, we did this. I'm like, oh, thank God, Jesus Christ, yeah, okay, that sounds like a playable video game and not a absolute logistical nightmare. This is what that game felt like when I played it on the N64 back in the day.
Yeah. And you can play Ocarina of Time without having to go in the menu and do the boots every time, and that's the one everyone talks about.
Yes.
Anyway, so we're getting off track here. PlayStation Plus. I will just remind everyone, because I like to remind everyone, because I think reporting forgets this. It is a scam to charge you to use your own internet. That part of these systems is absolute fucking bullshit, and that is why they're adding these much more expensive versions of the subscriptions, because they know they can only fool you so long.
No, that's not. I mean, they could keep it at $60 forever.
I know,
and nobody.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is like when you get like their sort of like quarterly financial reports and stuff come in. It's like insane the amount of money that PS Plus makes. Like, it's absolutely fucking mind-boggling. It is by far like the largest like section of revenue that PlayStation gets. Like, it dwarfs like the income that like Microsoft and Nintendo get for most of their shit. It's like so much money.
Because charging people to use their own internet on their systems that they bought is lucrative. If you're just it's a racket. It's lucrative,
and you have a massive user base, and it's like, if you could get people it's the subscription thing. It's just like you get people on the tap, and then eventually they're not even going to be using it anymore, but they'll have forgotten, and they don't pay enough attention to their fucking bank account shit that like they don't notice that every once in a while they get this weird $60. They just like, oh, I feel like I should have more money. Where did that come from? It's like, oh fuck, PS Plus is still fucking marching along, huh?
Yep. Anyway, so we'll see how this goes. We'll find out more about this in the months to come. But yeah, I think that's about what I've got for today, Sean. Hopefully we'll have more stuff to talk about next week, because I will have more time to do things, and we'll figure it all out. But yeah, I'm tired.
I haven't even done anything that extraneous, but I'm tired too. It's ranting about subscription service for like 15 minutes. It takes it out of me.
All right. Well, in any case, the podcast is not going to end here, because, like I said, I'm going to post in. This is the talk I gave at the Society for Cinema and Media Studies 2022 conference this morning, April 3rd. It is called Safe and Sound: How Video Games Confer Security and Subjectivity Through the Mechanics of Saving. I know that sounds like a very dry academic title, but I actually think it's interesting for this podcast, because it is about video games. It's about a topic that I am actually weirdly passionate about, but I don't ever see written about, which is save mechanics. And so I hope you will find it interesting. If you are watching this on YouTube, definitely look at the screen, because this is an actual, it's not me on screen, because you have to go to my paid OnlyFans for that. But you can, but it is visuals, and it's got some clips from games and slides and stuff. So that'll be all here in the YouTube video. And if you're listening on the podcast app and you want to see the video version, you can go to the end of the podcast on our YouTube channel, or go to my personal YouTube channel, where it's up in shiny 4K, because I decided to experiment with that. So I wanted to make a video in 4K, and this is, usually the videos I make are 3 hours long because they're the fucking podcast. This was 20 minutes, so I was like, I can actually do my 4K experiment with this. So
yeah,
there you go.
Although if you want to watch the 4K version, you do have to pay us $5 more a month than you currently do. That's our 4K package. But it comes with extra low prices on all of the other great services we offer in products we sell in our store. So I think, personally, it's a great deal.
Confess to me all that you have done, child, that I might record it in an adventure log. These are the words recited to the player whenever they save their game in Square Enix's Dragon Quest series, the progenitor of the Japanese role-playing game. And in the world of Dragon Quest, saving the game means visiting a church to speak to the priest. How may our church assist you, faithful disciple? The cleric asks. And from a menu of options, the player chooses confession, and shares all that they and their companions have done, so the priest may record those experiences in a journal. Where other games have simplified or obscured the act of saving, for Dragon Quest, a series deeply steeped in tradition, this save ritual has always stuck just one of many customs that makes these games such a warm, comforting experience to their fans. Compared to modern Western games of similar sizes and scales, Dragon Quest's methods of saving may seem quaint, perhaps even troublingly restrictive. Yet to those who continue to play and love Dragon Quest, confessing to save one's game is an ineffable part of the series' singular charm. Dragon Quest speaks to the potential for the omnipresent function of game saves to serve as more than just a necessary technical function of the gameplay experience. Like any other mechanic which serves to immerse us in the world of the game, saving one's progress can be integrated into the diegesis. Doing so can, in tandem with other gameplay mechanics, help to forge a strong link between player and game. One stronger than if, all else being equal, the diegetic save mechanic were absent. I demonstrate this assertion first by explaining how save mechanics have evolved into three distinct categories. And I argue that in the case of what I call the diegetic operator save, the act of saving one's game operates upon the player as a psychological tether, providing a link to our existing progress in which we take comfort and confidence when moving through the game, and as a suturing mechanism that encourages identification between player and game. In this way, the diegetic operator save emerges as uniquely effective in enhancing one's immersion in and identification with the world of the game. So, let's take a look at these categories. The framework I'm building on here is Alexander Galloway's 4 moments of gamic action, which are built upon two intersecting axes: machine versus operator actions and diegetic versus non-diegetic actions. First are diegetic machine acts, or actions by the game made separate from the player that still exist within the world of the game. Think here of the behavior of NPCs, or environmental aspects like weather and terrain, which shape and affect the world, but that the player has no control over. Second are non-diegetic operator acts, what Galloway calls actions of configuration. Pressing pause or adjusting the settings in a menu would apply here. Third are diegetic operator acts, player-controlled movements that take place within the world of gameplay, such as Mario jumping or the Master Chief firing a battle rifle. Fourth are the non-diegetic machine acts, which are actions the game takes without operator input that are also detached from the world of the game, like keeping scores or adjusting difficulty. I find these distinctions very useful, to the point that I'm a little surprised Galloway does not extend his analysis to game saves, which are wholly applicable in this schema. Saves are a gamic action available to the machine or the operator, situated within and without the diegesis, and which feel meaningfully different to the player depending where along these axes the game's save mechanics are situated. Thus, I have identified 3 overall categories of game save mechanics, based on Galloway's formulation, but specific to the act of saving. These are the non-diegetic operator saves, diegetic operator saves, and non-diegetic machine saves. First, the non-diegetic operator save, which I define as manual save mechanics divorced from the world of the game. These are cases in which the player chooses to save, usually through a non-diegetic menu consisting of 1 or more save slots, either at intervals set by the game or at intervals of their own choosing. The act of saving is not an action that in any way exists within the diegesis, and is analogous to actions of configuration, like adjusting settings in a menu. Examples of games with this kind of save mechanic include Myst, Baldur's Gate, Skyrim, The Witcher 3, and all or most entries in The Legend of Zelda, Fire Emblem, Pokemon, and Final Fantasy series. The game may allow players to save at any time, as in Skyrim, or it may restrict players to save in certain areas, like Final Fantasy VII, or after certain milestones, like in Super Mario 64, which allows players to save after stages are completed. In all cases, saving is determined by player choice, the choice not to save being just as relevant as the choice to save, and is not narrativized as part of the game's internal diegesis. Save states in video game emulators and scores and leaderboards in arcade games or arcade-style games would also belong to this category. Second is the diegetic operator save, manual saves situated within the world of the game. The Dragon Quest example is our prototypical illustration here. It's an option left to the player that they can choose whether or not to interact with, but which exists within the world of the game. Many mediums for this diegetic interaction are possible, from confessing to a priest in Dragon Quest, speaking to your house's personal gyroid in the original Animal Crossing, or visiting Candy Kong's save tent in Donkey Kong Country. These save mechanics may include a non-diegetic component, such as a menu with save slots accessed after engaging with the diegetic save medium, which could include additional extra diegetic information like a play clock, but they are primarily framed as diegetic interactions within the narrative flow of the game. Like many aspects of game design, they are not purely categorizable as one kind of operation, and we could argue that there is no such thing as a purely diegetic save mechanic, since, as Jesper Joule would argue, all saves rupture the continuity of time within a game's diegesis. Some games do take efforts to mitigate this, though. Dragon Quest, Stardew Valley, and Animal Crossing all allow for narrativized breaks taken by the player/avatar character, thus making the break taken by the operator to at least partially fit within the diegesis. Either way, the diegetic components of mechanics in this second category are phenomenologically significant, and as I will soon demonstrate, the distinction is still very valuable. Third and finally is the non-diegetic machine save, more commonly known in gaming parlance as autosaves, or cases where the game creates a save record or checkpoint without operator input. These are employed by a wide variety of games, as both a primary and secondary save mechanic. They are most visible in genres like fighting, racing, and sports games, along with MOBAs and competitive multiplayer shooters, all of which are games built not on linear narrative progress, but on earning experience, ranks, abilities, costumes, equipment, and so on. The first two categories of save mechanics would make little sense here, and automatic machine saves are therefore the standard, working as a constant background operation invisible to the player. But these are hardly the only cases in which non-diegetic machine saves are employed. First and third-person shooter campaigns, in addition to their adjacent multiplayer modes, almost exclusively use autosave mechanics. In series like Halo, Call of Duty, and Gears of War, players move through largely linear levels in sequential order, and the game saves progress at predetermined checkpoints. And various open-world or exploration-based games have employed autosaves as their primary save mechanic too, such as the Batman Arkham quadrilogy, Red Dead Redemption, Diablo 3, Grand Theft Auto 5, and most entries in the Assassin's Creed series up until 2017. It is important to note that these three categories do not exist in isolation, and while I am unaware of a game that involves all three, since non-diegetic and diegetic operator saves would be mutually exclusive, it is extremely common for games to employ an operator save and a machine save in tandem. Starting with Grand Theft Auto 4, for instance, Rockstar's games have employed autosaves as the primary save mechanic, with non-diegetic operator saves available to players in a menu if they so choose. Most commonly, though, the opposite is true, with some form of an operator save serving as the primary mechanic and an autosave or checkpoint system serving as a secondary backup. This is how the most recent Dragon Quest title, Dragon Quest XI, handles saving. It primarily employs diegetic operator saves through the confession mechanic, but also features an autosave that quietly kicks in when one enters a dungeon or a town to ensure that a game over does not result in too much progress lost. This kind of mixture is common in the contemporary gaming landscape, with games like Animal Crossing New Horizons, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Fire Emblem Three Houses, each foregrounding operator saves while being backed up by an additional autosave system. Now that we have these categories established, what do we do with them? Well, we're going to take a little dive into psychoanalysis and semiotics here, so just bear with me, I promise there's a point to all this. In his book The Damaged Core, Salman Akhtar explains what he calls the fantasy of a tether, which is one of three fantasies related to unresolved separation-individuation in the period of childhood development where infants simultaneously develop a sense of self and form boundaries to see others as individuals. The third substage of this development, rapprochement, is where unresolved separation-individuation stems from. It's the stage where a child both desires independence and fears abandonment, wanting to explore and go further afield while maintaining proximity to the mother or guardian. A successful maturation through this stage results in the child developing a mental image of their mother in which they can take a sense of safety and confidence when they're physically distant. Through multiple case studies, Akhtar identifies patients whose anxiety stemmed from a failure to fully develop along this path, finding themselves stuck in rapprochement, where they desire both the freedom to explore and a tangible proximity to a source of safety. So a person might go jogging, but only within a very strict distance from their house, or they might imbue another person, place, object as a totem that they know they can return to. These become imagined tethers that minimize separation anxiety. And there's a lot of applicability here to the act of saving in a video game. Saves serve as totems, privileged objects from which we draw the safety and comfort needed to continue playing. And virtually all save mechanics operate as tethers, with varying degrees of strength. This is easy to illustrate in an example like Dragon Quest, where the game gives its players confidence to move through a massive world by marking the landscape with churches that serve as tether points. Imagine the counterfactual, where Dragon Quest provided no save points at all, and merely expected players to explore everywhere and complete all objectives over dozens of hours without the ability to save or a comforting place to do so. And the effect becomes clear. It's kind of like rock climbing. There are a few crazy people who would do it without a harness, but most people are gonna want that tether. Operator saves tend to be the strongest tethers, because they are the ones we can most easily see and access. This applies to both diegetic and non-diegetic operator saves. While the former situates the act of saving within the game's world, the latter still allows players direct, controlled access to their saves, and thus a way to regularly check that their tether is intact. Non-diegetic machine saves, autosaves, can therefore be trickier, because while the tether is still there, we know the game is working behind the scenes to record our progress, it's been obfuscated from us in a way that makes the privileged object of the save much less tangible. And while all save systems are subject to corruption or failure, when it happens to a save we have no control over, it feels a lot more catastrophic. The peace of mind that comes from having control over records of our progress, like the ability to save in multiple slots, or to make copies and backups, that helps strengthen our resolve over fears of systemic meltdown. The relationship between the player and their tether, their save file, can also be leveraged by the developer as a central mechanic, and there's actually a long lineage of games doing just that. This is most obvious in the Metroidvania genre, a grouping of games named for the influence of the original Metroid and Super Metroid, and the subsequent innovations of 1997's Castlevania Symphony of the Night. In games like these, which also include Dark Souls, Axiom Verge, SteamWorld Dig, Hollow Knight, and a small army of other indie titles, the player is given a large, labyrinthine, interconnected space to explore, with progress made by finding equipment and power-ups, fighting enemies, solving puzzles, unlocking shortcuts, and slowly but surely getting a sense of the layout of the world. Under the influence of Super Metroid, most of these games employ diegetic save rooms, or areas free of enemies or hazards, where players save their progress while exploring. Finding this room is often a key goal while surveying a new area, and there's an explicit risk-reward trade-off in venturing far enough to find a save room and make one's new equipment, power-ups, and map data permanent versus going too far, perishing, and losing all of that essential progress. Which is exactly how Akhtar explains the tether fantasy, as a neuroses about distance, literal or figurative, from the anchoring person or environment. The main manifest issue, he writes, is of distance versus safety. And that's a great way to describe the central animating force of this gameplay loop. Dark Souls and its sequels, including the recent sensation Elden Ring, make this particularly devilish by tying experience and leveling to souls collected from vanquished enemies, which can only be used by reaching a bonfire and spending those souls on improving various attributes. If the player keeps going further without spending souls, they can amass a greater and greater pool of souls on which to make bigger enhancements, but they also risk being killed by an enemy, at which point they have one chance to return to the place where they died and collect the lost souls. Otherwise, they're gone forever. The bonfire thus serves as the totem to which the player is tethered, and their distance from it determines the choices they're going to make, much like a bolt in rock climbing. But there is another framework which applies here, and it makes for the other half of the equation in why I argue the diegetic operator save is the category of save mechanic with the greatest potential effect on the player. This process is called suture, and it is, as defined by Katja Silverman, the name given to the procedures by which cinematic texts confer subjectivity upon their viewers. Silverman's work originally applied to cinema and literature, but the broad strokes are also fitting for video games. Just as Silverman combines a psychoanalytic and semiotic framework to understand the processes of identification in the cinema, we may do the same to consider what a game is doing when it asks us not only to watch on-screen action, but to inhabit the body and the physical space of an on-screen avatar. There's always a semiotic relationship at work between player and game, as is true of all forms of narrative art. Stories asking us to identify our own subjectivity with that of the story's subject is a key part of the illusion of narrative. Silverman outlines 3 subjects here. The spoken subject is us, the viewer, the reader, the player. The subject of speech is the fictional character with whom we're aligned. And the speaking subject is the apparatus through which this character communes, be it the pages of a book, the moving images of a film, or the programming and interface of a video game, all of which offer the subject enunciation. So in video games, when the spoken subject, the player, identifies with the subject of speech, the avatar, the signifier I now confers the subjectivity of the avatar to the player. This, in short, is the process of suture. It refers to the moment when those subjectivities intersect, and the viewer/reader/player allows a temporary melding of their subjective identity with the figure on screen or in text. The operation of suture, writes Silverman, is successful at the moment that the viewing subject says, yes, that's me, or that's what I see. So what is that moment in a video game? Let's take Super Mario Bros. World 1-1 as an example. There are no button prompts, no on-screen text beyond the score, the timer, and the coin counter. We press right on the D-pad, and Mario moves right. We press left, and Mario moves left. We hold B, and Mario runs. We press A, and Mario jumps. We go forward a few steps and see a glowing block with a question mark. We hit it, and Mario collects a coin. We go a little farther, hit the next block, and Mario finds a mushroom. It collides with him, and he grows to twice his normal size. We jump on top of a Goomba, and it disappears. We knock into the Goomba, and Mario becomes small again. We fall into a pit, and the screen goes to black. As these actions accrue, happening to Mario, but as a result of our hands manipulating the controller, our identities merge, and the player and Mario suture. Thus, when Mario falls in the pit and the level begins anew with 1 fewer life on the counter, the player does not say, "Oh no, Mario died." They instead exclaim, "Oh no, I died." And this is the moment, to paraphrase Silverman, when we have sutured and come to agree, yes, that's me. Crucially, video games are filled with many, multivalent points of suture. Small actions like running, jumping, firing a weapon, controlling a vehicle, or answering a dialogue prompt, all of which confer a link between player and avatar, between the spoken subject and the subject of speech. These links have a snowball effect, such that while no single action is enough to successfully suture us into a game, the unique combination of commands and mechanics that forge a title's core gameplay loop come to create an overall sense of subjective alignment between player and game. And one of those actions is indeed saving, which is not always used as a suturing effect, but absolutely can be. To return to the Dragon Quest example, visiting the church and confessing to the priest to save is a clear point of suture, a moment where the signifier, pressing the buttons to input the commands to speak to the priest, and the signified, the hero telling the priest about his adventures so the priest may record them in a log, come together to create the sign that is the game's save. Diegetic operator saves are unique among the 3 categories of game save mechanics for how they are predicated upon suture. Non-diegetic saves do not attempt to use saving as a point of identification. It's an abstract function, divorced from the world of the game or the subjects therein, that does not ask the player to align their subjectivity with any on-screen element. Diegetic operator saves are different. They turn the act of saving into a gameplay mechanic with a diegetic resonance, such that saving the game becomes a suture point, just like jumping, running, or any other basic command that helps build a game's overall suturing effect. Take, for instance, the journal in Persona 5, which is given to the protagonist, the player's avatar, near the outset of the story by Sojiro, the protagonist's new legal guardian. The protagonist has been sent to Tokyo for disciplinary reasons, and Sojiro tells you/them to write down all their/your daily activities inside of the journal as a rehabilitation routine. Functionally, the journal is the medium through which the player saves, but it is firmly aligned with this subjective, diegetic justification that tells the player a great deal about the protagonist's newfound circumstances and how he is seen by the people around him. We could also look to Stardew Valley, where saving by going to bed at the end of each day helps confer a sense of rhythm, in keeping with the diegetic setting of a small-town farm, where routine and repetition is meant to impart a sense of comfort and familiarity. Saving on its own cannot suture us entirely, but then no single game mechanic can. We know in the back of our minds that the priest in Dragon Quest isn't actually writing a detailed novelistic record of all the hero's adventures. Just as we know hitting A in Super Mario Bros. Doesn't compel an actual flesh-and-blood Italian plumber to jump in the air and bang his head on a big metal block. But if you take the jumping and the saving and the running and all the other possible mechanics that combine to make a gameplay loop, they can, in their collective totality, suture the player into the world of the game. The relative strength of the diegetic operator save rests on its ability to both suture and tether the player through the mechanic of saving. These two phenomena can work together, and in fact they must, because while a game can have a save mechanic that tethers but does not suture, a game cannot have a save mechanic that sutures but does not tether. This is because the in-game save mechanic that confers subjectivity is also the one that provides an anchor point for the tethering effect of saving. The church, the journal, and the bed all confer subjectivity by making our process of saving internal to our on-screen avatars and the world they inhabit. But these places, objects, and characters also serve as totems of safety, places of privilege to which we tether ourselves while playing. The first 4 Resident Evil games are my favorite examples here. Each utilize an antique typewriter as the method of saving, usually placed within a safe room where enemies cannot typically intrude. They also require players to keep and find ink ribbons in the world, each of which allows for one save. Finding one of these safe rooms and rushing over to the typewriter to make permanent all the accomplishments made while traversing a labyrinthine haunted mansion or a creepy dilapidated police station is a little reward in and of itself, a reforging of the tether akin to what I previously demonstrated in Metroidvania games. But these moments also suture, even more strongly than in most Metroidvania examples, because of the Resident Evil franchise's intense horror mise-en-scène, which makes retreating to a safe room, where we as our character can calmly analyze our inventory, get prepared, make a record, and then go back outside, well stocked, feel like a moment where subjectivity is conferred. The exhale of relief we let out must, we think, be shared by STARS agent Jill Valentine or rookie police officer Leon S. Kennedy. And the games themselves are clearly aware of this potential on a fundamental design level by making resources, like the ink ribbons, scarce and keeping the tension high, lending every interaction with a typewriter both a suturing effect and a reassuring tether. In this way, the games demonstrate how, through a design that interweaves sutures and tethers, game save mechanics can be so much more than a mere technical necessity. Not all games are going to allow for this effect by virtue of their genre, design, platform, and so forth. But there are many cases where the space absolutely exists to integrate save mechanics into the diegesis, providing players both the tether they crave via the personalized control of an operator save, and serving as an additional point of suture in a medium that requires multiple sites of subjectivity conference to create stable identification. A diegetic operator save is a powerful tool developers have at their disposal to help forge unique gameplay identities, make the gameplay experience more enjoyable, and, through the combined forces of suture and tether, bring players one step closer to that ever-elusive, omnipresent buzzword, immersion.